Hello, I'm Judith Yates, true crime author and criminologist. This is Best True Crime. Every episode, I take you on a journey to explore crime, forensics, and investigations. Hey everybody, I'm Judith Yates, true crime author and criminologist. Welcome to Best True Crime. And normally we would go to a location where an actual crime has occurred so we can talk about this crime, talk about missing persons. But today we are going to bring you to our houses, respective houses live to talk to one of my favorite authors, Miss Synova Cantrell, who is an expert on all things mobster. Thus, we're wearing our hats today. And she's going to tell us a little bit about a female mobster. Normally, mobsters in this time area were male. It was a man's world during this time, but we're going to be talking about Miss Louise. So, Synova, hello. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Yates. Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about you and why do you like to write about organized crime?
I started out writing the biography of an ex-gangster from Chicago. It was kind of his redemption story. And then I started studying the business, and I realized you have to build a business around it to sell a book. You can't just go write a book and become the next, big thing. You have to build a business around it. And so I started writing a blog, and I started writing about various true crime things. And then I started working as a victim's advocate and writing about cold cases, missing persons cases, that sort of thing. In my experience of doing this, I ran into a woman named Phyllis, and her brother and her dad were both killed by members of the Dixie Mafia. Well, until I met her, I'd never heard that term. I didn't know what it was. And so I had to study a lot because I was asked to kind of join it was kind of an unofficial task force to raise publicity about this Dixie Mafia stuff, because they had different types of investigators and things working this in different areas. And then I was asked to kind of be the media person. So I was generating buzz. So I had to start researching all these different things about the Dixie Mafia. So that's how I kind of got into it. Started working, of course, I got some connections with the Italian mobsters because of the first book, and then I've gotten some connections in with the Dixie Mafia, and it's kind of just blown into bigger than you have one plan for your career, and it kind of goes all different sorts of ways. But that's kind of how I got started. Now I've got 6 books. I've got a couple more coming out. Got a podcast starting with an ex-mobster co-host when I don't have Yates on, and so that's kind of who I am and what I do. If that answered your question, kind of a long-winded.
That's all right. That's all right. That's how we are here. We get on the phone and 2 hours later.
Yeah.
Are you ever afraid talking to all these mobsters, working with all these mobsters?
Not the mobster, not the Italians. It comes down to, you kind of have to know. I'm from Texas, so you'll have to forgive me. I'm from Texas.
Hey,
I was raised by
Texas
hunters.
girls.
We got 2 Texas crazy girls here. But I was raised from by a hunter, and one of the things when you become a hunter, you have to know your prey. If you're going to go out and hunt a deer, you have to know your deer. You know what kind of areas they like to frequent. You know what they like to eat. You know what they try to avoid. Okay. I say when you're dealing with people like this, you kind of have to know your animal. You have to know who you're working with. Now, Italian mobsters, you don't have to worry if you're a woman. They don't hit women. They respect women. They have that's their culture. Your women are revered. They're respected. They're treated nicely. They're treated well. They don't hit women. They don't have a hit on women. They don't kill women. You might get a few here, random people that go against their culture and go against the rules of the mob, but basically against their whole persona. They are born and bred to respect women. Now, their idea of respect may be different, but when it comes to being scared to talk to them, I'm not scared to talk to them. If I end up in a dark alley with an Italian mobster, I'm okay. I'm not worried about it. Now, if I'm going to be talking to some drug gangs that aren't affiliated with the Italians, I want to know kind of who they are, what they're doing. Now, if I was talking to Dixie Mafia, I'm very on edge because they don't have the same rules as the Italians. If I'm talking to serial killers, it's best to know what their fetishes is. You know, now if their fetish is petite blue-eyed brunettes, then I'm not talking to them alone. You know, you kind of need to know your animal. Does that answer your question?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And I see, I live in Kentucky. We're having
Sweet tea in a mason jar. Yeah, I try to class it up a little bit when I do my videos. I'll have my sweet tea in my wine glass, and then I'll have people like, "You're drinking alcohol in your videos?" And I was like, "It's sweet tea in a wine glass. What can I say?"
How do they think
Where I
half
come
these videos
from,
are
the
made?
mason jar.
How do they think half these videos are made? Plus, both sides of my family are from Kentucky. Hallelujah. Sweet tea in a jar, okay?
Yep.
So, but
In a
anyway,
mason jar.
so do you think this new breed of organized crime is different than the old breed?
Within the Italians, you think? Is that what you're talking about? Or
Altogether.
you're talking about altogether? I believe so, yes. Because there is a difference when, for one, I'm trying to be circumspect here, but the old guard did things a certain way. They had reasons for doing things a certain way. They had rules, they had regulations for a reason. Now, you always had the wild card that would go out and go against that. But they had rules in place. Now everything just seems to be wild and free, do what you want. And it makes it to where it goes back to knowing your foe. If you're in law enforcement, the more you know about your opponent, the more you can manipulate that, and you can use that to bring them in. You know, now I believe the Italians, they think they're wiped out. I don't think the Italian mafia is wiped out. I think they're going back underground. I think they're regrouping and going back underground. We're not going to hear as much from them. They're going to have all these, these things in the news about getting this one or that one. But I believe the main core of the Italian mafia is going to go back underground where it was to begin with. But when it comes to like the Latin Kings and the street gangs and all those, they have a whole different core set of values. And so you have to, the violence, their violence is escalated. They don't have that set of rules. They don't care if they kill a made man's wife. They don't care if they kill, a public official. They're going to do what they're going to do. And so they're kind of a wild card that I would say, I don't think that that's going to, I don't think you can tame that. I really don't. I don't think you can tame it at all. So violence in general, I think you better watch out, because people are frustrated, especially now. We're in 2021. Everybody's had a hard year last year. This year is not all that necessarily much better. People are getting frustrated. So I think violence is going to increase periodically. I hate to say that, but I think it will. People are frustrated and don't know how to release that frustration in a beneficial way. So I think it's going to increase. Maybe I'm a doomsday prophet. I don't know. But that's my opinion.
Another one. Well, I know, like working in the prison system and corrections, we had our old guard mobsters, and some of the names being very, very infamous, and they would keep to themselves. They would stay out of trouble. And if they're doing something illegal, which of course they still are, it's all going to be on the outside. It's going to be numbers, it's going to be, you name it, and there's going to be a hand in it. And it was all on the outside of the prison. If you shut down their room, you're not going to find anything, because it's going to be, literally whistle clean. But
right.
These younger guys coming in, and the old guard would complain about the new guard. these young guys coming in, they're showing off, they're showing out. You're going to find contraband, you're going to find weapons, you're going to find things that they're not supposed to have. You're going to find weapons smuggling coming in, drug smuggling coming in, and now cigarettes, because that's the new hot commodity since all the institutions are going cigarette free. And, you know, the mobsters kept to themselves and nobody bothered them. They didn't dare. And, you know, pinochle was the big game. You know, they'd all get together and play pinochle, and they'd all sit out in the yard together and such. But it was just so totally different. And you could always tell, you know, you had these gangs and pretend gangs and such. But it was two different worlds. And I even had old school inmates telling me it's not like the old days, you know. So.
No, they had rules and regulations, and I don't necessarily think their rules were set out by a moral compass. I think their rules were set out because they were an organization, and they were supposed to, all the way down to the very bottom foot soldier, was supposed to think what would be best for the entire organization. You're thinking about the family as a whole. So it would bring on too much heat if you killed that journalist. It would bring on too much heat if you took that made man's wife and you guys had a war between two made men. You know, so I don't necessarily think that they're saints, you know, or nothing, but I think those rules held back the violence a bit, you know, and they look at me like I'm insane. They're like, Synova, how can you say that? You've got dead men in barbershops, you know, but that was a very planned, meticulous hit. You know, that wasn't just violence in the streets, chaos between two warring factions. And of course, you know, you had episodes of that. But I think when you have any, and this is, you know, any situation where you don't have rules in place, if you don't allow people to know what the rules are, you just let them go wild and free and do whatever they want, it's going to be violent. Because what holds us back, you know, as a society is the fact that we value life. Well, once you take that value for life out, then what difference does it make if you take somebody's kid, if you take somebody's wife, if you take someone's daughter, if you kill that person's husband? You know, once you take that out of that human being on an individual basis, that life is not something that should be revered and happy and try to preserve. Once you take that value for life out, it doesn't matter what organized crime, you know, squad you're, you know, it doesn't matter if you're a gold card member of the Italian mafia. If you take the life out, that, you know, value for life, then that takes your humanity away. You know, you're a monster. You know, that's, you can see differences in criminals. There's some psychotic serial killers that you can look at them and they're just not even human anymore. It's like they don't have it, and it's because they have lost that value, that sense of life. You know what I mean? And so I fear more people like that than I do the Italian mafia.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about this notorious female gangster, Miss Hathcock.
Yes.
Louise Hathcock. Set the stage for us. Set the stage for us. Now, see? Huh?
Well, are you sure that was key in that?
The time period, what's happening, what's going on around this woman's life, this world.
Yeah. Well, when I talk about her, you'll catch me smiling, and it's because people want to label people just straight up good or straight up bad. They don't want to discover that there's some good in the bad and there's some bad in the good. You know, it's always, you know, who's wearing the black hat, who's wearing the white hat. In those old cowboy westerns, you could tell who the good guy was because he had a white hat on. You know, it's not like that in life. And when it comes to Louise Hathcock, so many people have labeled her negatively. And yes, she did some pretty bad things, but there was also a lot of people around there, and some of her family that's still, you know, are still alive. And I have spoken to them, and they're like, you don't understand. There was so much good in this person as well. And so it's kind of one of those things that you have to, you know, justify in your head. You're like, how can someone that would like to beat you over the head with a ball peen hammer, still be so good and so worried about poverty in her area that she gives thousands of dollars to the impoverished in her area, so it's kind of hard to justify in your mind because you think, oh, she's a monster, and so that's what I think people need to understand. I smile when I talk about her because she was a kick butt woman. And if you read what made her become what she was, you can't help but think, man, if I was in that same situation, would I have come out as good? Would I have made the same decisions? Louise Hathcock was talking about right after the Depression. Everybody was extremely dirt poor. They didn't have a lot to eat. She was a teenager and she had to go get a job as, a 13-year-old girl had to go get a job because there just wasn't enough money. Their dad just couldn't provide for the family. He had an emotional meltdown and he left the family, so that just made it even worse. So here she is without a father, mother doing everything she can. She's a 13-year-old girl, and 13-year-old girls, hormones raging, and she was kind of cute. So she found that she liked to get the attention of older men. And the way place that she could do that would be at the state line where they had all these clubs. Well, she went in and very promiscuously promoted herself until she got herself a job. And there she got a job, and she liked, all the attention she could get with the guys, and she would use her feminine wiles, and she found she could get extra tips, and she found she could do this, and she found she could do that. She found that she can kind of control men with all of this type of behavior, and so it just started slow. It wasn't necessarily, that she was born and bred a monster. She wasn't necessarily raised in a lifestyle of her parents weren't monsters. It was just she was extremely poor, and she found she found value in all this extra attention, and she found she could make money. And so this is how it started. It started somewhat innocently, and then she found one man, though, however, that had, I'll say, a different moral compass, because you'll find out later that it wasn't necessarily any better than hers. It was just different. She found this man named Jack Hathcock. Now, Jack was the only man that her little promiscuous behavior wouldn't get his attention. He would not pay attention to that, and it turned him off. It was the only one. So she could get every man's attention in the county at this, at the state line club, except for his. And of course, that's the man she wanted, because that he was the only man she couldn't get. And so he was a little bit shy and backwards, and he decided that he wanted her, but he wasn't going to let her know. He wasn't going to, promote this behavior. And so eventually he does get the guts to ask her out. She accepts, and then something happens. And of course, we all know what it is. Once she has him, she doesn't want him anymore. Okay. There's a difference, though, here. Once she has him, she realizes that he's very ambitious. He's got ties to the biggest kingpin in the area. He keeps promising her. He said, "Don't you worry. If you stick with me, we're going to have plenty of money. We're going to own the entire state line one of these days." And she believed him, just because of the way he was working, the way he was pushing, the connections he was making. He was helping run moonshine. He was doing everything, and she believed him. So when he fell in love with her, lock, stock, and barrel, he proposed to her, and she didn't want to marry him. She didn't want to settle down. She was still a teenager. She wanted to just keep doing what she was doing, but she realized that he was the best opportunity she had, because she knew with the way he was going to be rich. He was going to own the state line, and that's what she wanted. She wanted wealth. She said nothing was ever going to make her go back to starving. She was never going to go back to living the way her parents had lived. And so that's what drove her. So she said yes to Jack Hathcock. They got married. They worked for people that owned these different clubs at the state line. They were very rough and tumble. You had moonshine, because this was back in it was a dry county. You had moonshine running through. You had prostitution and gambling. You had all these things that were illegal vices. And everything was, you know, somewhat okay until something dreadful happened. Now, we know Louise didn't want Jack. After she got him, she didn't want him. She did agree to marry him, but she did not agree to not step out on him. So she had been sleeping around with other people, and Jack seemed to be the only person in the whole county that didn't know. Well, Jack stepped, you know, the man that stepped up and was his dad was named Tim Lake. His name was Clive Tim Lake, I think his name. I'll have to look him up. But anyways, he was the big wig that actually owned the county, and he was the big wig, kind of he was the big man when it came to organized crime in the area. Well, he got tired of his son that he had raised. He got tired of him being a clown, and he's like, everybody in the county knows but you. And anybody else would have told Jack that his wife was cheating on him, would have got smashed in the face. But he respected this man, and he knew that he wouldn't lie to him. And so he's like, I found Louise. I know where she's at. She's been sleeping with so and so over in this county, in this town, and you need to go get her, and you need to make an example out of her, because you look like a clown. And if you want any respect, you've got to take care of this. Well, Jack took some of his guys. He chased her down to this town, beat the living, you know what, out of her. She really felt like she was going to be killed. So she was so scared when they put her in the back of their Cadillac. She felt like she wasn't going to make it home. She was afraid they were going to dump her somewhere. She was already beaten severely, but she had enough wherewithal that she felt like she had to get out of the car. So while they were driving down the dirt road, she was laying down, and she literally opened the door and rolled herself out. Okay. Then she got up and she ran with everything that she had. They found her. They beat her some more. She ended up in the hospital almost dying. Well, the police come and try to interrogate her and find out what happened. But come to find out, they were just wanting her to say that everything was okay, because Tim Lake had actually paid off the local PD. And so her real statement wasn't taken. They didn't take her seriously. That's when she realized that her husband, Jack, may be able to be manipulated, but Tim Lake won't be. And if she doesn't change, she will be dead. And so she was taken out of the hospital. And everything I've read makes it sound like before she was even healed up enough to leave. I don't have any definite proof of that, but just the way things are worded, it makes it sound like they went ahead and took her out, whether she wanted to go or was ready to go or not. They took her out, hauled her back to Jack, and they said, you ever step out again, you will be dead. And after that, there was something changed in her. That is when she started using her brain. Okay. She always used her feminine wiles to get through life. And then she started being real quiet and timid for a little while. And everyone thought she had learned her lesson. But in reality, she spent the next bit of time studying her opponent. She studied all the men that came in the bar. She studied Jack and his associates. She studied Tim Lake. She studied how all of them work, how they tick, what they do, how their business runs. She became so invaluable because she knew the business inside and out. She began running the business because Jack didn't have enough education to do the book work. So she made herself so invaluable to the business, to the organization, that to lose her would be very detrimental. So that was one smart thing to do. But then she started finding ways to take over. And so that's what she did. She would find ways to take over this run or that run. And she started taking charge. And so they talk about how violent she was and how she would In her apron, she would have her ticket book where she took the orders. She would have a gun and she'd have a ball peen hammer. And there were many recorded incidents where she beat people half to death with a ball peen hammer. She had some guys in her restaurant that would, you know, kind of bouncer type people. And if she saw them in a fight and they started struggling in the fight, she would just walk up to their opponent behind them and pop them in the head a couple times with this hammer. And then her guy would be able to overtake the opponent. And so this is how it progressed. It progressed from the innocence of childhood manipulation of men's hormones with a pretty girl, all the way to near-death experience, to becoming the brains behind this machine. And that's kind of maybe the reason why I don't just write her off as a monster, because I don't know if I would, going through that whole thing, if I would have turned out a whole lot different. You know what I mean? There wasn't a lot of options
Right.
in her area.
Period.
Yeah, yeah. So the fact that what I really found amazing about her was she took some time to step back, reevaluate, and study her opponent. Now, to me, that shows brilliance, because I don't care whether you're playing chess or you're playing for life like she was. She literally took time to step back, reevaluate, and study her opponent. And that's what you got to do. You know, that almost sounds like my author coaching speech. You got to reevaluate and you know, study the market. You know,
Imitates life, imitates crime.
Does, you know, but she became that. And then eventually she owned the restaurants, she owned the bars, she you know, her and Jack owned the state line, and then she ended up having Jack killed and she owned the state line, and she became the mafia, and she made the men her mob moles. You know, for anybody that studies the mafia, the girls that hang over all over the guy's arms like ridiculous trophies, those are called mob moles. And so in her case, you know, we're talking 19, you know, all these, you know, right after the Depression age, in rural Tennessee, she became the mafia. So she literally overtook the organization that nearly killed her, and then she overtook it, and she became the mafia, and the guys were her moles. And that's kind of, I think, I don't necessarily agree with her path and what she did, obviously, but there was never any documented evidence that she actually killed anyone. Even though she's been labeled a killer, there was never any documented evidence that she did a lot of things that they said she did. Because when you go back and study the state line mob, which is what kind of morphed into the Dixie Mafia, there's so much local legend that has blended in with the story that it's almost impossible to separate it out. Now, if you go into this area, you will not hear anything good about Buford Pusser, which was the sheriff. Because, and this is, I'm one of these people that I take all sides of the story and I realize the truth's in the middle somewhere. Well, you've got people who love Buford Pusser and made him out to be some kind of idol. And then you've got people who hate him and think that he's, you know, demented man with a badge. I realize he's probably right in the middle somewhere. Well, you go to Tennessee, you won't find a lot of people that are real big Buford Pusser fans, but you also have to realize the only people that are left are the people that he took down, their family members. You know, most of his family's gone. So there's no objective, you know, audience there. You know, you can't go and find someone that's in the middle of the road. Oh, well, I knew both sides and this is what I think. You know, you've got all people that hated him. You know, you've got all the Hathcock's family. You don't have the Pusser family anymore. So that's where we are. There's a couple books about Louise Hathcock. You can check her out. I've wrote about her on my blog. A friend of mine actually was trying to write a new book on her, working with her family member to get the other side of the story, kind of thing. Because I do feel like she was kind of like the Bonnie in the Bonnie and Clyde story. Nowadays, if they had killed Bonnie and Clyde the way they did, nowadays there would be such a stink rose
Oh yeah.
because
Oh yeah.
Connie didn't have the criminal record that warranted her murder and her
Right.
death. You know, to me, she was murdered by law enforcement because of her association with Clyde. You know, and that's almost the way I feel like Louise Hathcock's been labeled. She wasn't murdered by them, obviously, but I feel like she's been labeled, and really her actual crimes I don't think actually add up to her legend, if that makes sense.
So what happened to
So
her?
maybe she passed away, and she had well, she died when she got into a gun battle with Buford Pusser. Okay, now there's a big, huge, famous scene in a movie and everything in the Walking Tall movies. Buford Pusser was ambushed on New Hope Road. His wife was killed. His face was shot off. This was a big, huge thing that they made a big, huge bunch of Hollywood movies about, which were really they're not accurate to least, let's just put that. But anyways, they're based very loosely on a true story. But anyways, that ambush was a result of this gun battle that she had with Buford Pusser. Now, for the first time in her adult life, since she was beat to death in the back of that Cadillac, since she was almost beat to death in that Cadillac, she was out of control. Okay. Her big boy toy, Towhead White, which was, you know, actually a somewhat big time Dixie Mafia guy, he was in prison. A lot of her people were dead or in prison. And for the first time, they actually had enough to take her to court, and she didn't have the pull to buy herself out of it this time. So she was looking at a hardcore criminal case about her activities at the Shamrock Motel. Okay, so she was actually looking at some serious time for the first time in her life, and it was the first time since that deal when she was a teenager that she was out of control. She couldn't manipulate the situation anymore. All of the men in her life's gone. She had been, we'll have to back up just a bit. She'd become a really bad alcoholic because Jack had killed the love of her life. She finally found a man that she'd loved, really had that connection with, and Jack found out and he killed him. Okay, so she ended up having her boy toy kill Jack. So, but anyways, after P.D. Plunk was his name, not Plunk, P.D. I'll have to look it up. It's been a while since I wrote about it. After P.D. was murdered by her husband, she became an extreme alcoholic, and she had alcohol in her hand from the moment she woke up to the moment she passed out at night. And then everything started falling apart. You know, she has Jack killed, then Towhead gets taken off for this, and everything's falling apart for her. So she does her same routine she always does. When she hated the Northerners, she didn't think the Civil War was over. If there was a so-called Yankee that came through her motel, you could guarantee that there were going to be drugs put in their drinks. They were going to pass out and not even remember, get back to their hotel room. Their hotel room would be gone through, and everything of value would be stolen. This is what they did all the time to anybody they didn't like the looks of, and especially if they were Northerners. So they did this, but this time the lady went to the cops, and the cop that was in charge wasn't the cop that got the call wasn't somebody that she could buy off. Okay, so they actually come, Buford Pusser and his deputies. They come, and they come to the thing, and the lady says, right there, right behind the bar, right there, that is my purse that was stolen from my room. Well, Louise has this, I don't know what she was thinking. She says, Buford, come step back here with me. I need to have a private word with you before we do this. Okay. Now, right off of the hotel, right off the restaurant was the hotel. Now, it was hotel rooms, motel rooms, whatever. And apartment 1 was hers. So they just basically stepped around the corner. Okay. She walks into the room, and he walks in behind her. Well, as soon as he walks into the room, he realized that she had spun on Hill and she'd pulled the gun on him. Okay. Now, what happens when you pull a gun on a cop? You're going to get shot. Okay. Now, there's a big conspiracy that he shot first and that this and that. I don't get into that. She pulled a gun on him. He shot. It hit the shoulder right here first. Hit the shoulder, spun her around, and by the time the second shot came, it hit her right behind the shoulder on the other side, and it came out the front. Okay. So it was 3 consecutive shots real quick. She pulled up her gun again. So we're talking about someone who shot in the shoulder, spun around, shot again. She still turns and tries to shoot him again. Okay. By the time the third one goes through, she's dead on the floor. Okay. So this is how she dies. And Towhead's in prison. He's like, you killed my woman. We're going to take a hit out on you. Okay. So this is how she dies. She bleeds out in the hotel that she had fought so hard and stolen from the mafia and stolen from the state line mob. She died right there in the place that she left. She died in a place not too many, I'd say a few yards from the place where her husband bled out and died when her boyfriend killed him. So kind of a sad ending to a very sad tale, if you want to ask my opinion.
Interesting.
So, so that's who Louise Hathcock was.
In that area, or was she taken somewhere else? Is she buried in that area, or do you know?
She was buried. I don't think she wasn't buried right there. She was buried in another town over, I think, where some of her family was buried or something like that. Now, see, she still has a daughter, a granddaughter that's alive. And her granddaughter is the one that told me that her grandma had been, she's kind of like, of course, hers is probably more severe than mine, but I don't tell people my maiden name, because even though my father got himself put together and became a pastor and tries to help troubled youth, he had a life before then, and I don't say my maiden name in some counties because I've had to suffer a lot from his past. She's like, she has lived her entire life trying to live down the Hathcock name, because she's like, I'm trying to I'm living and getting affected by the sins of my grandma. She's like, it's 2 generations and I'm still being affected by the sin. It's not the sins of the father, it's the sins of my grandma, and so she's got a lot, but she also would like to have a book written to show people it's not all big glamorous. She became the mobster and she died in the motel, and just like the Bonnie and Clyde, they go out with a bang. Well, who were they before that? What happened to this person? Because she was a naive little teenager that liked to bat her big blue eyes. You know what I mean? She didn't understand the ways of the world and the ways of men. She was just started out as a teenager goofing around, and so it was one of those things. Yeah. It was one of those things where you feel like, what a waste of human existence. You know what I mean? Because she could have, to me, what really defined her story was that moment that she stopped, reevaluated, and took over the very organization that nearly killed her. You know what I mean? That was what impressed me about her. Anybody could carry a hammer and a gun and shoot it or hit somebody. You know what I mean? But what impressed me was that she was able to, with her mind, take over, make herself so invaluable that nobody would dare try to hit her because the business wouldn't run without her, and then eventually take everything over. That to me, that's a powerhouse woman that if she had been in a different time frame, maybe in a different location, in a different socioeconomic environment, what could she have accomplished, if she'd been in a different way?
Yeah. She had street smarts. Yeah. Now, does she appear in any of your books?
Yes. Yeah, she's in the Dixie Mafia book. You can see it back here. She's actually quite a bit of her story. There's one chapter that's all about her, and it kind of gives you an outline of who she was and how she relates to the story that I was writing about. And then there's Queen of the State Line Mob is one book.
Is that yours?
No, it's not mine. It's a friend of mine's, and then, but it's kind of the public story rehashed. But it'll give you an idea of the public story. And then I'm really hoping that this friend of mine, she's one of my friends and one of my author coaching clients. I'm trying to help her actually get it done, because I think the world needs to know the other side. I mean, because I know somebody released The Other Side of Bonnie Parker. I definitely want to read that book. You know, I mean, I definitely want to read, who was she? How did she get tied up with this man that ended up, you know, going out in a flame of glory? You know, they make that Hollywood sound like it's some great deal. I'm like, you walk by that bullet-riddled car and see the blood and the bullet-riddled bodies, and you see what's left of what was a human being. It's not glorious at all. You know,
Every movie they've ever made on Bonnie and Clyde, none of them show the true story. I was kind of hoping The Highwayman would.
Yeah. No,
maybe close,
no.
but not.
Well, I'll tell you a little secret. I know a producer. I met her at a Bonnie and Clyde festival because trying to find a way to tell you this without telling you.
Thinking, because I can tell that face.
Bonnie and Clyde kidnapped someone related to me.
Mm-hmm.
So at this Bonnie and Clyde festival, I've been asked to come speak and bring pictures and things like that. Okay, so that's how I met this person. And she has been working for years on a true to life documentary about Bonnie and Clyde. And she has so much information. I mean, she came down to this little dump of a town that's been dead because the highway passed it decades ago, just to hear about this one little segment that most people don't know about in the Bonnie and Clyde story that included my family. And so I know that she's even got some family of Clyde Burrow. She's got some of his family that are working. And so I know if she ever gets that project together, that is definitely something I will promote, and I will definitely, I would definitely say it's as close to accurate as anything will get, just because I've seen her study over the last, and that's been like 6 years. And I haven't heard her release it yet, but that would be the only one that I would actually be interested in watching. Because Hollywood gets a hold of it, and they're more interested in telling a good story than they are necessarily telling the truth.
Yeah. Well, the first movie sucked, and the TV special was, I didn't even bother because I watched the first 5 minutes and I said, I can tell you right now, none of this is going to be real. I have read in anything that I could get my hands on the whole Bonnie and Clyde saga since I was small. It was probably the first criminal justice true crime case I was ever interested in. And I would love to go to Gippsland. I would love to go to the Bonnie and Clyde Festival, although I'm really not so happy about the whole festival idea.
Right.
And the museum itself is one of my bucket list trips. So hopefully that, I'll make that. And, it angers me because when I lived in Dallas, without knowing it, I lived right in the middle of all where that happened. The filling station Clyde's father owned was right down the road from me. Houses where different events happened right in my neighborhood. But I didn't know that because I didn't have any of the books that were available. Well, they weren't available at the time. They had been written after I moved away. So here I am living in the middle, of this case that I've studied since I was a tot. And I didn't even realize it. I've probably driven by that gas station a million times and didn't even realize what it was.
It was. Yeah, see, that's the thing. I think it's a story that needs to be told. Not the big blaze of glory in Hollywood. I think it's a story that needs to be told specifically for two reasons. One, our so-called criminal justice system, I feel like, made Clyde Burrow.
Right.
Because they sent him to the roughest, horriblest place as a kid for a minor offense, and he came out what he was.
Right.
He wasn't that when they put him in. And then the second reason, they killed Bonnie when her criminal record didn't warrant it. And I'm like, that wasn't an accident. That wasn't a strategic the maneuver that went wrong. They planned on slaughtering anybody and everybody that was in that car. Mm-hmm. What if they had kidnapped a child because they wanted directions? They were always kidnapping people to give them directions someplace.
Right.
And then letting them go at the state line. That's what happened to my family member. I'm like, what if they had kidnapped a child? Mm-hmm. And that child was in the back seat? Would that child have been slaughtered right along with them? Probably, because they had built up they were going to take them out no matter what attitude. And so that's the story that I think the reason why the Bonnie and Clyde story needs to continuously be told, because we need to learn from our mistakes. And you can't learn from them if you don't talk about them. Our mistakes was we made Clyde Barrow and we killed Bonnie when her crimes didn't warrant it. And those are two deadly, terrible mistakes that we can't as a society forget.
Agreed. Synova Cantrell, where can we read your books, or where can we pick up your books and learn more about your coaching classes?
My website is synovainc.com, synovaink.com. You can go there. It's kind of like a dumping place for everything that I have. You can go to the true crime side. You can go to the podcast side. You can go to the author coaching side. I just try to help people publish their books. I try to help them learn how to build a business around it so they can make a good income on writing. And you could just go to synovainc.com and find everything that I have. All my books are on Amazon. And then you can also find them on synovainc.com.
Fabulous. All right. Well, we are going to close it up. Thank you again for being with us. Thank you for talking about Miss Louise Hathcock. It was a fascinating story. This female mobster right in the middle of a bunch of guys, and it sounds like she really knew what she was doing in a bunch of middle of ne'er-do-wells. So thank you again, and
thank you.
Be sure and check out my books at www.truecrimebook.net. I'm Judith Yates, and we will see you next time. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Best True Crime. I'm Judith A. Yates, and I hope you subscribe. Be sure to visit truecrimebook.net and be safe out there.